Alright, what's up guys? My name is Zach and today I am driving a 1985 Renault Encore LS. Up front is a 1.7 liter inline 4 and down below is a 5-speed manual transmission. Now I am super excited to be driving this Renault Encore for two reasons. First of all, we don't really get many Renaults here in the US and we actually got them for a very short amount of time, and this is part of that era. And the second reason is the fact that this is part of that rare Renault era. And so I'm excited to share this car with you because yes, it's French, but it actually has quite the American roots, and we'll talk about why a little bit later on. But if you would like to submit your own vehicle, you can head on over to my website, zackpradel.com/submit. It's a quick and easy submission form, and you would get a video of your car just like the one you're watching now of this Renault Encore. So if that's something that you want, you can check that out at zackpradel.com/submit. But let's get back to that 1.7 liter inline 4 under the hood, making about 80 horsepower. It's not a very powerful car. However, in this era, at this time, this was the most powerful engine you could get. You could also get a 1.4 liter that was shared with the Renault Car, which I also have a video on. So the 1.4 liter was not the desired engine. This is, and the only real big issue that you'll find with these is the timing belt. So if you plan on buying one, I would recommend doing the timing belt ASAP, as well as doing the pulleys that go with it, because sometimes those will go bad as well. But other than that, it's a pretty decently reliable engine for a 1980s economy car. Now, like I said, paired to it is a 5-speed manual transmission. It's fighting me a little bit. It's not super happy, although it is a chilly New Jersey morning, so I guess I could attribute some of that pain and gain to that. But overall, it's a manual transmission. It's fine. It's doing the job. However, you could find these in auto. Last but not least about the drivetrain, the Renault Encore LS is front-wheel drive. So how does it feel to drive a Renault Encore LS? Well, like I said, the shifter isn't really amazing. The clutch is a little bit heavy. However, the ride is actually phenomenal and the handling is wonderful. French cars have always had a very high focus on suspension. And this goes all the way back to post-World War II. France didn't really have many good roads left, and so their cars had to kind of fill in the gaps. So this car actually handles really, really well. And although I know that French cars are that way, it just always catches me off guard how smooth and silky these drive down the road. Other than that, steering is fine, throttle's fine, visibility is good because it's an 80s car. With that stuff out of the way, let's talk about the interior. Well, in front of me, I have two main gauges and a little center gauge. Off to the left is my speedometer, off to the right is my tachometer, and in the center, I get my fuel and coolant temperature, but then I get this little gauge at the bottom giving my oil level. This isn't oil pressure, it's the oil level. It's how much oil is actually in the dang car, which is kind of funny to see and something you don't often see in cars. On the steering wheel, I just get a little Renault badge, and that's it. This is pre-airbag. Off to the left, I have a little climate control vent, and moving out of the door, we just have our cranks for the windows, and the owner has placed an aftermarket cup holder on here, but that is not functional, and so we will do a big friggin' model test, but it fails. The Encore doesn't have any cup holders from the factory, so overall, it is a fail. Moving into the center, we get two little climate control vents. And down below, we have a quartz digital clock. Love seeing this. Definitely reminds me of my 85 RX-7 that used to have a very similar one. Hazard and rear defrost, as well as a blank button. Then off to the left, we have our climate controls. Very interesting, very vertical. It's not often that cars will do climate controls in a vertical fashion, but the Renault Encore does. I also do get a 12-volt outlet off to the right and our radio down at the bottom, AM and FM. Very, very simple here. Nothing new to report. Then we have the shifter itself, very, very French. I don't know what kind of accent that was, but not a French one. But it definitely reminds me a lot of the 1983 Le Car that I drove. So very cool to see that and have some nostalgia with it as well. Then we do have the parking brake down below, and we'll move up to the seats. Now the seats are burgundy, as with the rest of this interior, and they are very enjoyable. However, they do have a little party trick. So in order to give the rear seats a little bit extra leg room, you can actually swivel the front seats upward, thus taking away from the back seats chest space, but giving more leg room. Very, very interesting and very weird feature that I haven't seen in a car before, and that was just Renault's little way of saying, hey, take a little bit of extra space. However, speaking of those back seats, let's hop back there and do a back seat review. All right, so we're in the back of the 1985 Renault Encore LS, and a couple of things to note. First of all, knee room, leg room is not fantastic, and this is the seat in the upright position. I can't imagine this coming any closer to my face. So even though those rocking seats are very, very cool, I don't know how practical they are. But once we are back here, not a whole lot going on. Don't even get a center console. However, these seats do fold, which is nice. And that's pretty much it. This was an economy car. This was something that was affordable for small families, whatever it might be. This wasn't something that you would want to take on a really long road trip across the country with the dog and 3 of your kids. That's what the station wagons in the 80s were for. And so it's not what this was for. So with that frame of mind, it's not terrible, but I also wouldn't want to be stuck back here for too long. Let's hop out. We'll take a quick look at the hatchback and cargo space, and then we'll talk about the looks. All right, so we're on the back of the Renault Encore LS, and a couple of things to note. First of all, this does have 2 keys. Very, very American to have 2 keys at this time. The silver one is for the trunk and doors, and the black one is for the ignition. So come back here. There's also no trunk popper from inside, which is interesting, but we do get this really nice cargo shelf. Can't imagine how hard it would be to find a new one of these. But coming down here, we do have some really awesome Renault artifacts, I guess you want to call it. They used to race these, which is really, really cool. You could pause the video and read these if you want, but definitely very interesting to see all of this history with the Encore. But the trunk is a decent size. I would say like bigger than like a Yugo at the time, or bigger than any of those other little hatchbacks. This was a more full-size hatchback, which is really, really nice to see. And you do get 4 full doors, so lovely back space in the Encore LS. Now we gotta talk about the looks, and I like the look of the Renault Encore. I think it has this sort of charm to it that most 80s cars tend to have. Now here in America, we got the 5-mile-an-hour chunky bumpers. Overseas, this was known as the Renault 11, and they didn't get these bumpers that we got, a couple different things, but this is the hatchback version. They also made the Alliance, which was the sedan version, of which I actually have a video of an Alliance GTA coming out soon, so stay tuned for that. But overall, I like the look. With all of that being said, let's get on to my final thoughts. What do I think driving a Renault Encore LS from 1985? Well, I've enjoyed this experience. You know, it's been fun. It's always interesting as me, an American, to be driving a Renault. We got them for such a short amount of time here in the States. They sort of dabbled with us and came and went, much like my GPA in high school, so it's always a treat to be driving a Renault. But let's talk about AMC, another 80s brand that this car is very closely associated with. So back in the late 1970s and early 1980s, Renault wanted to break back into the American market. They had sold cars here before, like the Daphne or Dauphine. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but they wanted to sell cars here in the US. And so one of the easiest ways to do that is to pair up or really buy into an existing American company. And while the big 3 were off doing their own side quests, AMC was like, hey, what's up? And so Renault bought into AMC and utilized their dealership network. These were sold at AMC dealers, and actually, depending on where you registered or bought the car, sometimes this was known as the AMC Encore LS. It literally varied state by state. After the oil crisis, we were falling in love with 4-cylinder front-wheel drive economy cars. And so Renault saw dollar signs, and they said, hey, we make some 4-cylinder front-wheel drive cars. Let's send them over to the Yankees. And they did. And then, well, they didn't sell well. They didn't sell well at all. People didn't really want a French car at the time. And looking in here, I mean, we also had better options. I think a lot of the Japanese counterparts to this car do things a lot better, are a lot better. And to be fair, Renault shacking up with AMC wasn't on the front foot anymore. They were kind of on the downhill. As it was, post-oil crisis, AMC was not what they used to be. And so for Renault to pair up with them and buy into them was an interesting decision to say the least. But by this era, 1985, it was pretty clear that AMC wasn't going to make it, and Renault wasn't gonna make it either. Which actually in 1987, they gave it one last ditch effort with that Alliance GTA, a sporty car to fight off the BMW 3 Series and Celicas and RX-7s, and that car was a lot of fun, but that car came too late as well. AMC was already gonna go to Chrysler, and so that's what happened in 1987. AMC was sold off and Renault came with it, and from that we got the Eagle brand and the Eagle Premier, which was interesting. Those were sort of runoff Renault cars, and AMC was chopped up and the Jeep brand was utilized, but the brand AMC itself was killed, and it ended up making what was so strange in the 1980s and 90s of Chrysler. And since then, we haven't gotten a Renault in the US, technically. Now, Renault is actually currently shacked up with Nissan, so we do kind of get some trickle of Renaults here in the US in forms of Nissans with like engines and stuff, but you can't go out and just buy a Renault here today. And that was all because of the lasting impact that this car had. We still feel it nearly 40 years later. And that is what I love about diving into old cars like this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Huge thank you to Steven for letting me take out his Renault Encore LS. Such a wonderful and cheery little automobile. I was so thankful that he let me take it out. He's been absolutely fantastic to work with. Cannot recommend him enough, and I look forward to working with him again in the future. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to rate the video, comment on the video, and subscribe if you really liked it. Take care, guys.